Ho, 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 heroes. Josh here from Panels to Pixels, and it's the end of the year, and as is customary, kind of a trope at this point on YouTube, it's the time where everybody starts ranking all of their favourite films of the year, their top comics of the year, top toys of the year, whatever it is. Now, I'm not going to do, a strict top 10 ranking or anything like that. It's been kind of a strange year for me. At the start of 2025, I was still a new dad. I didn't get to go out to the movies as much as I would have liked or read as much stuff or listen to as much stuff. So I'm just going to go through all of the media that I consumed, not all of it, but all of the stuff that's interesting to you, and just rattle through and tell you some of the highlights and what I dug, what maybe I didn't like as much. You get it. I don't need to do all this preamble. I'm just conditioned by years of doing YouTube videos that you've got to have an intro. We don't need an intro. Let's just start with some of the movies that I watched this year. And also, this is the fourth video in a row that I've been full of a cold. Such is the life of a dad whose kid now goes to nursery. So we'll kick things off with some of the big superhero movies of the year. And of course, the MCU continued to squeeze. Let's go with squeeze. Continue to squeeze out films this year. They were squeezing out.
Someone's been pulling the strings on everything.
You're under arrest.
So early in the year, we had Captain America: Brave New World, the fourth film in the Captain America quadrilogy now, I suppose, and the first film featuring the new Captain America, Sam Wilson, as played by Anthony Mackie. And so I didn't actually get to see this one in the cinema. I waited until it was on Disney+, and whether or not that hurt my experience, I don't know. But I will say I wasn't a big fan of this film. I thought it was plagued with all of the complaints that I have about a lot of MCU films. It was blurry, grey CGI. It was a pretty lackluster plot. One of the issues that the MCU has now is that you do feel that black hole of people like Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans because they were so charismatic. And it's not to say that Anthony Mackie can't be charismatic, because he really can, but I just don't think that he's like Chris Evans' level of charismatic, and there isn't really anybody in this film filling that role.
You're not Steve Rogers. You're right. I'm not.
Now, I actually really like Sam as Cap. I love the suit. I love the extra dimension to the combat and things that having those wings brings. But most importantly, there is obviously an interesting racial dynamic there. Having, the figurehead of the United States of America be a black man. I'm not going to get into the social politics of it any more than that, because honestly, the film doesn't. The film doesn't respect you enough to deal with any of that stuff. It kind of skirts around the edges of that stuff and then goes, hey, we're not going to get too political here. This film is about a president turning into a monster on the White House greens, but hey, we're not going to get too political. It's a touchy climate. In contrast to a superhero film that we're going to talk about later in this video, it's so toothless, this film, and just nothing. It's a complete nothing of a movie. And in fact, I will go one further there and say that I actually felt quite insulted by this film. This is my general feeling about the MCU now, is that they don't respect us as the audience. They don't respect us enough to put anything interesting in their film. They just go with, this term is overused now, but slop, the most milquetoast, generic, watered down stuff. And they're just, they assume that we're going to slop it up. It's insulting to put out such a half-baked film that is so ugly that, looks like a video game whenever there's any kind of digital effects going on. To have Harrison Ford, who is not immune to making bad movies, but is a bona fide Hollywood superstar, he is a legend of film, to put him in this film to have a handful of lines and then get turned into a really, maybe the worst looking Hulk that the MCU has had. How is it getting worse than it was in 2012? I don't understand. And I'm going off on a bit of a tangent here, but this is not me attacking the people who work on the visual effects. I know that the demands placed on those people, particularly by Disney, particularly by Marvel Studios, it's a lose-lose situation. So anyway, there was one sequence in Brave New World where, I can't even remember it was so long ago, but I think Anthony Mackie jumps out of a building window and, kind of somersaults, rolls along the top of a truck or something. I can't remember exactly what happens, but it was cut up in such a way, it was kind of like that Bohemian Rhapsody thing. I'm surprised I've not seen anybody mention this. And in fact, it reminded me of the 1990 Captain America film and how that became kind of a meme because of the fast cuts in the action. And as I was watching it, I was like, I can't believe that this is a Disney product. Say what you want about Disney and Marvel Studios, but there used to be you kind of knew what you were getting and you kind of knew that there was a certain level of quality, even if it was, McDonald's quality, there was a certain level of quality you were getting. And this film, I found it insulting.
You want me? Come and get me!
Anyway, I've gone in very hard there on the first film. Later in the year came Thunderbolts, from Marvel Studios. And, this one was marginally better, I would say. It was more enjoyable. It looked like a real movie for the most part. There was some practical effects going on. It was well directed. I forget the director's name. Apologies. This is all very loose and off the dome, this video, so I've not done any prior research. Anyway, I like these characters, and I think that's a sentiment I've seen other people. Florence Pugh as Yelena is a very charming, charismatic character. Exactly what I was talking about. You need these charismatic roles. David Harbour, even though he may be persona non grata nowadays, he is a charismatic figure as Red Guardian on screen. And then, you've got the rest who aren't as charismatic. No, but I enjoyed Thunderbolts. I thought it was okay. I thought the way that they handled the Sentry, Bob. I recently reread the original Paul Jenkins comics, and that was like a mini-series that I read when I was getting back into comics as an adult, because it was kind of, that was prestige Marvel at the time. And now having reread it after Thunderbolts, I'm kind of like, they didn't do much with that character. The Void stuff looked cool. It was interesting visually. But I don't know. I'm hoping that the Sentry will get revisited in the MCU and they'll do some of the more like interesting kind of, maybe meta-narrative, although I think we're all a bit burnt out on that with Deadpool and stuff like that.
We are the Thunderbolts!
Can't call ourselves that.
God, thank you.
All right, that's Thunderbolts. So we might as well talk about Fantastic Four First Steps, to cap off the third MCU film that came out this year. And I like this one. I think this was my favourite MCU movie of the year. I did actually get to see this one on the big screen. So, by July, things were getting a bit less hectic in our house and I was able to actually go out and see some movies. This movie was exactly what I was kind of pitching, maybe like 5 to 10 years ago when I dreamt of the idea of the Fantastic Four in the MCU. And, the only thing I would say is it's unfortunate that it's taken this long for it to happen. And my interest in the MCU has diminished so much that it maybe didn't excite me as much as it would have done, 10 years ago. However, like I say, I always wanted a Fantastic Four period piece set in the 60s. I love all the Jack Kirbyisms that they worked in there. It reminded me very much of Kurt Busiek and Alex Ross's kind of adaptation of that 60s Stan Lee and Jack Kirby stuff in Marvels, particularly the Coming of Galactus stuff and, the Sky on Fire and all of that stuff. That stuff that I remember reading as a kid, the Coming of Galactus, and it kind of being like, Kirby's art is obviously so dynamic, but it's obviously so stylized. And I remember like trying to imagine what that would look like in real life. And then when I read Marvels, it was like, oh, it would look like that. And it is cool to see that in motion, in live action, quote unquote, live action. I don't know if it is because I'm a family man now, but I was, quite touched by the family themes throughout the film and Reed's considerations that he has to make as, a father to be and as someone who feels the weight, of the responsibility of the world on his shoulders, but also someone who, does it for himself, for his own pursuit of knowledge, okay, let's get personal. From my point of view, becoming a dad, it was quite difficult to reconcile my sense of self-identity and my creative ambitions and all that stuff with this new responsibility. So Reed Richards' story in this film resonated with me, I suppose. And I thought Pedro Pascal was wonderful in this. I had a hard time kind of envisioning him as Reed when he was first cast, but I just thought, I forgot that it was Pedro Pascal, to be honest, during the movie. I thought he did such a good job of bringing that character to life. I thought Johnny and Ben didn't have much to do in this movie, which is kind of a shame because they're kind of the heart of the Fantastic Four for me. Although having said that, I think that their relationship is really well displayed in the old 2000s Fantastic Four movies. So maybe, it's good that this kind of focuses on a different aspect and keeps Reed and Sue at the kind of the core of everything here. One of the complaints that I've seen about this movie is the pacing and the way it just kind of, shotguns information at you and just, kind of never stops. And actually, in that way, this is going to be an absolutely mad comparison. But it reminded me of Oppenheimer. I remember there was a tweet about Oppenheimer when it came out that someone said that it was edited for the TikTok generation and everyone piled on that guy. But I knew what they were getting at. I wouldn't necessarily say that it was for the TikTok generation, but the editing in Oppenheimer was just like, no establishing shots. It was just like conversation in this room, conversation in this room, conversation in this room, just advancing the plot. And it was kind of exhausting. I loved Oppenheimer. I'm not a huge Christopher Nolan fan, but that's my favorite one of his movies. And I kind of got the same sense in this. You get the entire history of the Fantastic Four in the first 20 minutes of the movie, and it's all it's not just exposition, it's you're shown these things happening and it just rattles through, and then you're off to space, and then this is happening and this is happening, and it's I found it thrilling. I understand why other people would find it fatiguing, but I found it thrilling. I loved Galactus, actually, getting to see Galactus in a fairly comic book accurate depiction there. And I especially love Shia LaBeouf as the Silver Surfer and all that stuff, that chase through the wormholes and stuff like that. That was just it just felt good. It felt like campy space opera. So even though I love that retro 60s aesthetic, it did feel like a bit of a superficial veneer over what otherwise felt like a pretty bog standard MCU movie. And I suppose it kind of pains me a little bit that this version of the Fantastic Four is now going to end up in the 616 MCU. Probably get less saturated Kevlar suits and all of that business. But for what it was, I enjoyed this movie a lot. All right, before we get to Superman, I want to talk about another film that came out in July, and that was Jurassic World Rebirth. If you're groaning at the screen now that I'm about to talk about this movie, but I actually quite liked this one. 2025 was the year that I went hard into the Jurassic franchise. I've always loved the first movie, Jurassic Park, but I was never a dinosaur kid or anything like that. For whatever reason, this year with Jurassic World Rebirth coming out, and I had kind of high hopes for it with Colin Trevorrow directing. So I just went hard into Jurassic Park this year. I rewatched all the movies. I actually read the original Jurassic Park book for the first time, which I absolutely loved. I might even like it more than the movie, to be honest, because it's just a straight up kind of horror, adventure, thriller. Really good fun. So I became kind of dino obsessed, and I went to go see this movie opening weekend. It was actually my birthday weekend. I think this was the first film that I got to see in the cinemas since my daughter was born. And I just had the best time. I absolutely love this. Now, I'm not saying that this is a great movie. It's very by the numbers, but it was kind of exactly what I wanted. It was just, a big dinosaur spectacle, and it looked really great too. The whole thing was shot on film to try and tie it aesthetically to the original movie, and it was just really nice to see one of these big tentpole movies that looks like a proper film again. I'm not a digital naysayer or anything like that, but there is just something about the film grain that kind of marries the visual, the digital effects to the practical, and just there is a richness of color and obviously the grittiness of the film grain. You all know why film is so great. I don't need to tell you, but it was just really nice. I thought this movie looked beautiful, and especially for sequences like the T-Rex on the lake that's been kind of touted by many as the highlight of the movie. It just looked really good. So I'm not going to go on about this one too much. A lot of people said it was mid, and I can't necessarily argue with that. It was very by the numbers, but it was kind of, for 2 hours, I got to go in there, have fun with dinosaurs, and the big mutant dinosaur thing at the end, I've forgotten the name, but it's like the Rancor, which is one of my favorite Star Wars creatures, crossed with the Xenomorph, which is, probably my favorite creature design of all time, and then crossed with the T-Rex, obviously. So, I can't complain about that.
This island was the research facility for the original Jurassic Park.
Okay, let's talk about Superman. And this is a movie that I wouldn't say I loved it, but I respect the hell out of it. I was cautiously optimistic about James Gunn's take on him taking stewardship of the DC universe, and especially his take on Superman. But overall, I came out pretty satisfied with what we got. I thought David Corenswet is a fantastic Superman, dare I say the best since Christopher Reeve. And obviously that goes for his portrayal as Clark Kent as well. He's very charming. He gets that, gee golly gosh element just right. It doesn't ever feel forced in the way that, that could very easily become like, oh, you're just putting this in as a reference to the fact that the Superman is this golden age character and it feels anachronistic with the modern day setting. But it doesn't feel like that. It feels like genuine naivety that, you might expect from an alien who finds himself in the tumultuous and political world that we live in today. And speaking of which, you have to respect this film for going there. My mind wasn't blown by the political commentary in this film, but I was surprised that, a Warner Brothers production would kind of be so overt in its messaging. Quite difficult to talk about because I could say, well, this is an obvious analogy for Israel-Palestine or even Russia-Ukraine, but there will be someone in my comments arguing the opposite. But to me, it was fairly obvious, and I thought it was pretty right on. That they said, whatever your beliefs, this is wrong. This is objectively wrong. What's happening here? I'm not sure how much I really want to start trying to pull this apart politically in this unscripted video. Maybe that's something I could spend a bit more time thinking about. But the one thing I do want to say that this does a really good job at is kind of saying, this isn't a political issue. This is a matter of morality. And I think that that's something, again, that kind of resonated with me, that you can use politics as a shield, but when innocent people are being killed in, I don't know if they explicitly use the word genocide in Superman the movie, but certainly that's the implication, and it's barely an implication, it's very explicit. And that's Superman's whole thing, and that's why he gets frustrated in that scene with Lois in the interview, is because for him, politics and diplomacy just obfuscate the facts of right and wrong. Okay, this is a little bit of a minefield for my casual end of year video, so I'm going to tiptoe out of it and talk about Nicholas Hoult, who is just amazing as Lex Luthor. He was really the highlight of the movie for me. Just gets it so right. He's so pitiful and petty, but sinister and comes across as a real threat. And he's got the stacks of weird Silver Age kind of creatures. And you get Metamorpho Man and the monkeys tweeting and stuff like that. It just felt like, oh yeah, this is what we expected from James Gunn, this kind of reverence towards the Silver and Bronze Age stuff. But it was just really good fun to see all that on screen. Now, the one thing that did keep me at arm's length from, really getting close to this movie, I suppose, is the way that it looked. I didn't love the way that it looked. Although, I do respect that it had a style. It wasn't just doing the kind of Russo brothers, everything is washed out and everything is a medium shot. There was some interesting use of wide angle lenses and stuff like that. But the color grade in this movie, the kind of piss filter on everything, and I don't particularly like the Superman suit. It's yeah, cool, you've got the trunks, but the rest kind of looks like MCU parody kind of to me, personally. And I think there was concern when James Gunn was announced as the head of DC Studios or whatever, that there would be this MCU-ification of the DC characters. And I wouldn't say that spoils the movie for me, but it's definitely felt there. But it didn't stop me from having a good time. And actually, this Superman had my favourite moment in any superhero movie this year, any big blockbuster this year. Towards the end, there is a very emotional moment that was like a complete gut punch to me. I kind of, in a movie where you kind of know what's about to happen a second before it happens, and then that almost the surprise of that almost makes it hit harder. And there is a moment in Superman, it's somewhat similar to, I'm trying not to spoil it too much here. It's somewhat similar to the Yondu moment at the end of Guardians 2, where he says, ego might have been your father, but I'm your daddy. And it's kind of a similar moment like that with the Kents. And oh man, I was blubbering. Anyway, Superman, very respectable first outing for the new DCU, and I'm very excited to see where this goes. I'm much more excited about the future of the DCU than I am about the MCU. Surprising nobody, I think.
You have a dog?
All right, those are your big superhero movies for the year. I do just want to briefly talk about some of the other kind of sci-fi, horror, genre-y stuff that came out that I enjoyed. There were 2 Predator movies came out this year, which is hard to believe. But Predator Killer of Killers was an animated feature. I think was on Hulu, but for us it was just Disney+. And then Predator Badlands was your live-action cinematic release. I think both directed by Dan Trachtenberg, who directed Prey. If he didn't direct Killer of Killers, he was certainly, the creative head of it. But I think he directed it. Yeah! But Killer of Killers, I thought was just fine, to be honest. It had like a little bit of the video gamification of animated movies that I don't really dig. Well, just, there is a little bit of video gamification of all movies at the moment that I'm not really in love with, where everything just feels like a cutscene. And this was an anthology movie set across 3 different time periods. And but it's basically the same story 3 times, and I found it a bit boring after a while. I thought the animation style, it kind of has that Marvel What If animation style where it's like, I would describe it as having no style. There is no stylization to it whatsoever. I mean, that's maybe not fair for Killer Killers because I think it is a little bit more stylized, particularly in the designs of the Predators and in the combat. There's, some more dynamic stuff going on there with the combat. I think when Prey came out, I was really excited about the idea of the Predator franchise kind of becoming this time-hopping thing where you'd get like a pirate one or a Wild West one. But I don't know if Killer Killers really like lived up to that idea for me, which is, ostensibly what it is. You got the Viking thing, you've got like a feudal Japan thing, and you've got a World War II like dogfighting thing. I don't know. I don't want to dump on this movie too much. It is what it is. And it occurs to me that this is the kind of thing that would have been like an animated short back in the day. In like the 2000s or 2010s, it would have been like a web-only animated short, or it would have been a DVD extra. But now Disney can throw a little bit more money at it and turn it into a feature and lock it behind the subscription model. So, can't really begrudge them for that. There are some bigger implications for the Predator franchise, the Predator lore in this, about, the time hopping and also, without spoiling it, what happens to someone once they've beaten a Predator, what would have happened to Dutch after Predator 1. But that kind of feels like something to fill out the Wikipedia page rather than actual, good storytelling to me. Predator Badlands, I had a much better time with. I thought this was a fun movie. I wasn't bowled over by it, but I thought it was pretty fun. It was an interesting angle to have a Predator movie from the perspective of a Yautja, a Predator. We've had that kind of thing before in some of the expanded universe stuff in the comics and stuff like that, but it was interesting to see it in live action. The highlight for me was Elle Fanning, who was just super charming in both roles that she plays. This is actually, it's the year of actors playing like kind of twin roles, as we'll talk about with a few other movies. It's the legacy of Lindsay Lohan in The Parent Trap. Wow, I never thought I would bring up The Parent Trap in this video. Predator Badlands, it was fine. I did have a bit of a hard time with the look of Dec, and I get that he's supposed to be like a younger Yautja, but I just, he doesn't look like what I love about the original Stan Winston design. It feels very digital in the movie because of course it was. And we're so used to seeing the Yautja faces as practical things. This video is turning into me just being a complete practical snob, which really isn't the case at all. But, it does affect the kind of tangibility of these characters. And I did struggle a bit with that, but I really like Dec as a character. The performance that was able to come through that digital face and you kind of get on board with him. I liked it. Right, I'm going to speed round some of my favourite kind of horror movies of the year. Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein was just stunning, beautiful to look at. And it is kind of a film of 2 halves, and I think that I liked the second half more than the first. But I enjoyed it overall. And it's just always such a joy to see the worlds that Guillermo del Toro crafts, even if the film isn't, out of this world amazing. And Jacob Elordi was a great creature, and also Oscar Isaac does a very respectable English accent, much better than his one in Moon Knight. Sinners was great, and again, I remember watching that film and being like, wow, it's so great to see like a big budget kind of genre film that looks like a real movie again. Beautifully directed by Ryan Coogler, who had an unprecedented deal on this movie. I think the rights revert back to him after 20 years or something like that. I'd say the behind the scenes on Sinners is almost as interesting as the movie itself. I don't mean that as a pejorative. This is a vampire movie centered around Michael B. Jordan, who is playing 2 twins. So, this is the next example we have of Lindsay Lohan's influence. Yeah, Michael B. Jordan's really good in this. Haley Stanfield's really good in this. This feels like a movie that Quentin Tarantino wished he could make. Take that however you want to. I liked it. And another movie that I enjoyed a lot this year, a horror comedy, was The Monkey, directed by Osgood Perkins, who he himself is kind of horror royalty, being the son of Anthony Perkins of Psycho fame. And The Monkey stars Theo James as, guess what, twins. This is truly the year of the twin. Yeah, he's playing dual roles here, and this is a really fun movie. It's got some legitimate scares in there. It's quite gory and gruesome. Not all of the humor landed all of the time for me, but the stuff that did really made me chuckle, and I just had a really good time with it. It looks great too. It's really stylish, and you have these like extreme close-ups of the toy monkey's eyes, and it's just like a locked-off shot, but it's like it's so filled with dread. Yeah, really cool film. And the last little sci-fi horror film I want to highlight to you is Companion. I only recently saw this one a few weeks ago, and I just had a lot of fun with it. Again, it's kind of a horror comedy. It stars Jack Quaid, who at this point has become so good at playing a kind of a douchebag that, you know, you just spend the whole movie wanting to slap him around the face. Going into this one, I'd heard that the trailer spoils kind of the central conceit of this film. Although, to be honest, everything that you need to know is revealed within the first half hour of the movie. So even if you've seen the trailer, even if you've had the spoilers, this is still definitely worth a watch, because from that point on, it just becomes a romp with some really funny moments, and it just gets more and more tense and intense. And yeah, I just had a really great time with Companion. All right, that's it for movies. Shall we talk about comics? This is a comic book channel after all. I'm only slightly ashamed to say that I don't really keep up to date with Marvel and DC, or even like indie stuff. I generally nowadays wait until something has, you know, had accolades heaped upon it and then read it in trade or digitally. So when it comes to like collecting and reading stuff as it's coming out, I tend to stick to the kind of licensed stuff. I'm a sucker. I'm a rube. I get drawn in by recognize this thing, recognize Street Sharks. In fact, I bought IDW's Street Sharks, and you know, it's fine. I was buying the Oni Press Biker Mice from Mars comics, although I've dropped off of those. I've kind of come to my senses on those because, you know, these licensed comics, not to denigrate the people who are working on them, but they are what they are. However, one thing that is just automatically on my pull list is anything Alien or Predator from Marvel. So I've been getting all of the standalone stuff, but then also all of the Marvel crossovers. So Aliens versus Avengers wrapped up this year. That was like a year-long thing with Jonathan Hickman writing. And you know, that was okay. I'm not the biggest Jonathan Hickman fan, to be honest. And some of the stuff that I went online afterwards and people were saying, you know, oh, this line just like blew my mind. There's a line where somebody says, you know, you're dead by a bullet and you don't even know that it's been fired yet, or something like that. And everyone was like, oh my God, that line is, you know, blow my mind. My brains are melting out of my socks. And I thought it was kind of cringy, to be honest. Hey, Jonathan Hickman, if you can't tell a story in a comic and you have to do it in graphs and things, I'm not going to read that. I don't even really mean this. I'm just saying it to trigger people. But the Predator Marvel stuff has been kind of headed up by writer Benjamin Percy, and those have been a lot more accessible and a lot less cerebral and a lot more fun. So far there was a Predator versus Wolverine, I think, that came out last year. Predator versus Black Panther, I can't remember if that was last year or this year. There is currently, just about to wrap up, is the Predator Kills the Marvel Universe. But my favourite of the year, I have to say, was the Predator versus Spider-Man. This was just really good fun. It's extremely Predator 2 coded, which that's my favourite movie of the Predator franchise. And I suppose when I was shit-talking Dan Trachtenberg's new Predator movies from this year, I think it's just that it's not what I'm looking for from the franchise, which is just like, you know, I love Predator 2. I love that it's completely unhinged and over the top and big and bombastic. And that's what Predator vs. Spider-Man is. It's got the same kind of like sweltering New York heat wave, and you can just smell the hot garbage in the air, and it's making everybody crazy, and it's making the discovery of these skinned, you know, blood dripping, hanging bodies, just makes it all seem even more insane. And then it has Spider-Man in it. So can you really ask for more than that? I don't think so. Okay, I'm just checking my list of what else I want to talk about. There are no video games in this video. I didn't play a single new video game this year. You know, when you have children, everyone told me, oh, you'll be doing all those sleepless nights and you'll be up playing video games. And I had this plan that I was going to become a driving sim dad. I was going to get Gran Turismo 7, and at 3 a.m. I would be, tuning up my car to get the best lap time or whatever you do in those games. But that hasn't been my experience at all. I think we were lucky with our daughter. She sleeps very well, so we didn't really have those sleepless nights. And when we did, we have to be comforting her. We can't be playing video games. So not a lot of video game playing going on in this family. However, I'm very excited to check out Marvel Cosmic Invasion and also the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4 remake. So in the new year, hopefully I'll have some time to play those. Let's briefly talk about music. I know not everybody who watches my channel necessarily cares about my musical taste, but I'll just tell you some of the stuff I enjoyed. This year I enjoyed new music by Wet Leg and Wolf Alice. I went through a bit of a CMAT phase, her album Euro Country. I feel like the kind of alt-rock space is really dominated now by women and certainly like female-fronted bands. And I think that's very cool. I think probably when I was growing up, that the alt-rock space became very macho, and it was all kind of like ripped guys in black t-shirts. And I think that now there's been a bit of a Riot Girl revival, and ripped dudes in black t-shirts it doesn't feel very alternative anymore. I don't have a lot of new music to talk about. Music, more than anything else for me, is the kind of thing where I need a few years to kind of decide if I like it or not. I've talked about this in videos before, but I think that I have the opposite of recency bias, where I tend not to like things when they're new, and then it's only after a few years of distance I can go, oh yeah, that was pretty good actually. So if I've coming across as negative in this video, then that might be why.
We spot each other in a mannequin's reflection.
This year I also discovered a singer-songwriter called Richard Dawson, who had an album out called End of the Middle, and he is a Geordie guy from Newcastle in the UK. If you're overseas, you don't know what that means. But he has like quite a broad accent, and he makes weird, like psychedelic folk, like some pretty out there stuff. And he plays on like an old 60s, like Japanese rinky-dink kind of toy guitar almost. Although I'm sure it's, vintage and probably costs a lot of money. But it's, really, it has like a kind of a clunky DIY sound to everything, and it's also just musically he just wanders in interesting ways, lyrically very funny at times, and just hearing that really a very regional specific accent to be sung in, just very interesting. I would definitely check that out if you want to listen to something out of the ordinary. But the musical highlight of 2025 for me, I have to say, was Jack White at the Thanksgiving NFL game halftime show. So the White Stripes, incredibly important band to me. The fact that they were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame this year was just like a special moment for me as a fan watching on, and I got a bit teary about that. And yeah, I can't express to you how important the White Stripes were to me growing up. They were like, as a kid, I was into a lot of like kind of the dad rock bands, like the old stuff. And, the White Stripes probably are dad rock now. But I grew up listening to the Beatles and Led Zeppelin and stuff like that. And the White Stripes felt like, oh, this is like a modern band for me. And that was very exciting. And they just soundtracked so many like really important moments of my life, like first, relationships and stuff like that. It was all to the soundtrack of the White Stripes. And I was kind of obsessed with the whole aesthetic, the red, white, and black thing. Anyway, this is supposed to be about 2025 music, not 2003 music. But yeah, seeing them inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame was very cool. And then seeing Jack White at the NFL halftime show and bringing out Eminem, that was like the biggest jaw drop moment of the year for me. Just two great tastes that taste great together, but I never thought I would see them sharing a stage. And yeah, what a great mashup. Okay, we're on the home stretch now. I'm not a big TV watcher. I've always kind of been a bit skeptical of this golden age of TV because I don't want TV to be movies. I don't want to commit 8 to 10 hours to watching a story that could be told in 2 hours, and then it inevitably end on a cliffhanger to set up a second season that you might not even get. But, all of that aside, I did watch, because I'll watch anything that involves alien or aliens. I watched Alien Earth, Noah Hawley's Alien Earth, the first ever Alien TV show.
You're going to be the first person to transition from a human body to a synthetic.
And I got to tell you, man, I really enjoyed Alien Earth. I know it was kind of divisive, and this is only anecdotal, but I feel like I've noticed a correlation between the people that didn't like Alien Earth. They did like Alien Romulus, and vice versa. And I'm definitely in that camp where Alien Romulus didn't really impress me all too much. It felt very much like a kind of a greatest hits of all the Alien franchise, whereas Alien Earth had some interesting new things to say. Now, that being said, let's do this as a bit of a shit sandwich, and I'll say all the things that I didn't necessarily like about it. I do agree that the final episode was kind of underwhelming. I think the show is very ambitious over its arc, and has a lot of balls kind of hanging in the air, and then it doesn't necessarily tie up all of those things, or it ties them up in ways that were kind of underwhelming in the final episode. Some of it feels a bit rushed, and then other bits they just leave hanging for a potential season 2. I totally get that criticism. I think, a good example of that is the kind of, let's call it Chekhov's plant. There are all these new species in Alien Earth. There's like the eyeball parasite thing that can burrow into a creature and then kind of control it via the eyeball socket. What else was there? There's like these little leech things that suck your blood and they blow up all big. Oh God, it's been a while since I actually watched this. But then the point is that there was this plant thing that kind of hung from the ceiling, and it was kind of teased throughout the series. Like over the first few episodes, we learn what all the other species are and what they do, how they live, but we were never told what the plant does. And then it would just be in the background of certain shots, and it would loom over creatures, and occasionally you'd see its little proboscis kind of vine thing come out. And then in the final episode, you finally see what it does, and someone just steps under it, and it just, grabs them with a vine. And it's like, oh, is that it? Is that what it does? Because I kind of could have guessed that from episode 1. So Chekhov's plant there, we knew that, that it was going to do something, and unfortunately, it just didn't do anything very interesting. Also, a lot of people have taken umbrage with the look of the xenomorph. They went for a guy in a rubber suit. And I kind of dug that because it felt very much like the 1979 Big Chap. It doesn't bother me when they look like guys in suits, especially because we've had like movie after movie, especially with like Ridley Scott's prequels, where it's just like a really lifeless, floaty, weightless CGI design. So the fact that it was like a guy scrambling about in a hallway in a rubber suit, I thought was kind of cool. The only thing I would say, the head was kind of a bit fucked up. My wife and I joked that it looked like he'd had veneers at some point. It's, big teeth, let's say. Anyway, all of that aside, even an underwhelming finale doesn't detract from what was like an extremely enjoyable series for me, and I just had so much fun. It was so thought-provoking, and every week after my wife and I would watch an episode, we'd say, what do you think is going to happen, and speculating week to week was really part of the fun. In that way I saw the appeal of this kind of TV series. I love the way they ended every episode with a needle drop, other than the fact that it was all like Pearl Jam and Smashing Pumpkins and stuff that would be on my dream playlist anyway. I just thought it was so like jarring in this universe where traditionally it's all been orchestral scores and stuff like that, to have like, what is essentially pop music bring you out of the tension at the end of every episode was just really cool. And I really liked the character of Wendy. I'm forgetting the actor's name, forgive me. She's a Nepo baby, I remember that. But yeah, what a great character and what a great performance. So eerie and so kind of believable. As that's quite a convoluted brief to be given as an actor, that you're a child in an android adult female's body. But I bought that premise the whole way through, and just found that character very compelling. And also, I've got to highlight Timothy Olyphant in this show, who is, just amazingly good looking. And it's just a really cool android character, adding to the long lineage of great android characters in the Alien franchise, from Ash to Bishop to David to Andy, and now I've forgotten his name. The blonde hair and the overalls, what a great look. I think between this and Cobb Vanth in The Mandalorian, Timothy Olyphant has two of the all-time greatest on-screen haircuts under his belt, so good for him.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5.
Do you mind if I talk about podcasts for a second? This is another thing that people say as a new parent, is you'll end up listening to more podcasts than ever before. But I've always been an avid podcast listener, and I didn't find myself having more opportunities as a new parent. In fact, I've probably had less because I've been trying to leave my phone on my work desk and not, take it with me whenever I'm around my daughter, much to the annoyance of my family and friends who are probably struggling to get hold of me all the time. But hey, that's how it used to be in the 90s, and I'm perpetually trying to recreate that feeling. But in terms of podcasts that I did enjoy, there's the usual suspects that I enjoy year after year. The Weekly Planet is one I've been listening to since like 2012. Adam Buxton, I've been listening to. In fact, the first podcast I ever got into back in the late 2000s was the Adam and Joe Show. So I've always loved the Adam Buxton podcast. This year, I really got into a show called What Went Wrong, which is a podcast about movie making and kind of details the tumultuous and troubled history of some of the all-time great films, from like Star Wars to Jaws. They recently did ones on Toy Story, and they're doing some Christmas stuff at the moment, Bad Santa. I think they've just done Aliens. So yeah, it's just really fun. It's a bit like that show on Netflix, The Movies That Made Us, where they kind of do the making of, but it's a podcast and it's a bit more personable. And the two hosts are just, Chris and Lizzie, they're called. They're just fun to listen to. Yeah, good people. What else did I enjoy this year? Oh, I tell you what, I really enjoyed Toy Anxiety is the name of the show. It's a toy-specific offshoot of a Ghostbusters podcast called YHS. Yes, have some. And, I'm not the biggest Ghostbusters fan, so I generally just listen to the toy podcast, but they're fun guys. To be honest, they have been like a little bit of an island for me during the new parent phase, particularly when I've not been able to buy as many toys or be in the hobby as much. I feel like watching their show every week has been like a little island of sanity for me, and has also kept me up to date with toy news, and has also helped me stay in the hobby even when I've not actually been able to physically buy as many toys. So shout out to those guys. They recently did a charity stream for the Starlight Foundation, which is like a children's charity, and they raised almost $38,000 in one stream, which was just like, yeah, very impressive. They seem like sweet people as well. So speaking of toys, as I said, I haven't really been able to buy as much this year. And, at the end of last year, I did a top 10 toys of the year over on Panels to Plastic, which is my toy channel. I won't be able to do that this year, so I'll probably do vintage pickups or something like that instead. To be honest, I've become a little disillusioned with modern action figure collecting for various reasons. Obviously, there is the price hikes and the tariffs and etc., etc. But also, I've kind of just realised that vintage is where my passion lies. Vintage and then kind of higher end prop replicas, and I'm kind of skirting around the idea of dipping my toe in the 1/6 Hot Toys kind of water at the minute, because to me, your stuff like Marvel Legends and Star Wars Black Series, which I've enjoyed previously, it kind of falls into a little bit of a chasm where it's the worst of both worlds. It's not as charming and as stylized as the stuff that I like from the 90s, but then it doesn't look as much like the real thing as something like a Hot Toys. So I was finding myself, getting Marvel Legend after Marvel Legend and feeling really underwhelmed by them. In fact, I got the Maximum Series Spider-Man because it was like a Todd McFarlane style Spider-Man. And I'd kind of been, hoping that Marvel Legends would do like a true Todd McFarlane style Spider-Man for a long time. I got it. I didn't even open it. I just sold it on because I was just feeling so, no passion whatsoever for 6-inch super articulated action figures anymore. I just think I'm out on that stuff. And I've been selling a lot of my Todd McFarlane DC Multiverse stuff. Actually, that was kind of my breaking point as well, was the Batman Returns figures that Todd put out this year. Again, price hikes, so-called deluxe pricing, and they don't look like the people. That doesn't look like Michael Keaton. That only barely looks like Danny DeVito. The Michelle Pfeiffer's okay, but then it's got the weird proportions and everything like that. Anyway, I'm not going to bag on them, and certainly I enjoyed collecting those kinds of figures for a long time. But it was there was a point where I had all those figures in my car and I was ready to check out and drop £150 on all of those Batman Returns figures. And I was just like, what am I doing? Like, I would rather spend this and go and get a bunch of the Kenner figures, or, for £150, you're halfway there to a hot toy of just Batman. And I think that would be a better representation for me on the shelf than those figures. That being said, I did buy some stuff this year, and my favorite toy of the year, this is such a random thing. This was a real maniac move. I bought a life-sized Gizmo puppet prop made by Trick or Treat Studios. Just very cool. I really dig what Trick or Treat Studios are doing in general. They have got, like I was saying, they've got the high-end prop replica stuff. They've got some 1/6 Michael Myers and Texas Chainsaw Massacre figures. And then for their action figure stuff, they do that more retro, like 5-inch Superpowers style or 3.75-inch kind of Star Wars style. But they're not doing the 6-inch, Marvel Legends stuff that is just getting really boring for me, that every company does 6.5 inches, all the same points of articulation, the same ugly hips, the same ugly shoulders. There isn't a whole... It's not very exciting for me. But Gizmo here, he's got real artificial fur that's currently molting all over my trousers. He's got these kind of glass eyes. He's posable. He has, you can pose his arms, his head, even his ears, I think. And it's just, I don't know, I couldn't resist this. I'm pretty sure this came out this year. It was up for pre-order, certainly in the UK this year. It might have been end of last year in the US. But I'm counting it as a 2025 release. My toy of the year, against all odds, is Gizmo here, which is technically a Christmas decoration, I think. So after this video's done, I'm going to put a Santa hat on him and maybe nestle him into our Christmas tree. All right, I'm absolutely covered in Gizmo's hair now. Thanks for watching this video. No doubt it has been long and incoherent and, off the cuff. But hey, we're all family here. This year has been a real learning process for me in terms of the kind of content that I am now able to make as a father. I've had to make some compromises, and it took me a while to kind of find my footing within that, especially because I was, used to be such a perfectionist with the stuff I was making. But, you don't need to know all this. All you need to know is that I'm extremely grateful to anyone who's stuck by me through this process. It's extremely gratifying to me that, even after a few years of spotty uploads, I can make a video about a failed Marvel restaurant, or Maggot, the X-Men character, or the Batman NES game, or, whatever it is that I feel like talking about that month. And a few thousand of you will tune in to watch that. That means a lot to me. And I just feel really lucky to be able to do what I do here on YouTube. Thank you. Whatever you're doing this year, this time of year, whatever you celebrate, I hope that it's joyous for you. And I hope that you have a very happy new year. If I could make one wish, it's that we hit 85,000 subscribers here on Panels to Pixels in the new year, and then get working towards 100,000 towards the end of the year. You can support the channel on Patreon at patreon.com/panels2pixels. patreon.com/panels2pixels. And in the new year, I'm going to be doing more stuff on there as well. Here's a little tease. I want to do a series called Lifting the Lid, where I go through my entire comic book collection in a series of videos. That will all go up on Patreon. I don't think there's anything else for me to say. Let me know down in the comments, what were your favorite movies and comics and whatever else, and I'm excited to check it all out in 2025. Until next time, see you in a bit.